Dear beloved children, sweet grandchildren, and adorable great-grandbabies, I know you are waiting for your inheritance. I'm only going to take up a bit more of your time. You will find my last will and testament beneath this letter, but first, as I am a storyteller, I will leave you all with one final tale. Keep it close to your hearts, as I have my own all these years. I awoke this morning in the twilight, drifting about in my white nightgown. Taking my tea in the bay window, I gazed out into the misty neighborhood. The children were already lining up at the bus stop at the end of the street, but their eyes were locked on me as usual. Being a bitter old hag and living in your granddaddy's old rundown house while the neighborhood is built up around you, well, it tends to make people think that you're a witch. That familiar chill washed up around me, causing my spine to tingle and my heart to skip a beat. Wrapping my hand around that old silver cross, I took in an easy breath and closed my eyes. All around me, like a spiral of icy winds, I could feel his presence once again. "Bernadette," he whispered ever so seductively. He was beckoning me yet again. After making my way back into the living room, I sat upon my sofa, in between my flower pillows and my bumblebee and butterfly plushies. I lit my honey-scented candle as it rested before me on that antique stone coffee table, and as the scent drifted into my nostrils, I retrieved my old photo album from the center of the table. Upon opening it, I was greeted by his smiling face. His golden hair and blue eyes somehow shone through that old black-and-white photograph. We were grinning widely, probably giggling, as he gently pushed me on a tire swing in my backyard when we were children. I remembered it was taken a few weeks after my grandmother's funeral. I was only about 7 or 8 at the time, but even I knew it was odd for a little white boy to be at a black family gathering. It was in the hot summer of 1960, and apparently his mother was friends with my auntie when they were younger. I met both Johnny and his mother Judy that day, and I liked them both just fine, but it was Johnny that I was most interested in. After that, we were just about glued at the hip. We had to go to different schools, of course, but as soon as it was over, every weekday, he was always at my house, and on the weekends, we were dancing and singing to soul music on the radio. Somehow he always knew every word to those old and golden Motown songs. Everywhere we went, I could feel hot, hateful glares burning into us, especially when we held hands. But Johnny never seemed to mind, and I was always too enthralled by his beauty to even pay those old fools any mind. I was happy, and he was too. But after a few years, and we became teenagers, holding hands turned to warm embraces, little pop kisses on each other's cheeks became passionate makeout sessions, and frolicking in fields of flowers was replaced by moonlit lovemaking. And suddenly, I found myself falling in love with my very best friend. All of those silly songs finally made sense. I understood longing, pining, missing him, not being able to feel close enough to him even when he was sweetly holding me, being addicted to his kisses and never having enough time with him. "Bernadette, we have forever," he would say. "I ain't going anywhere." "Really?" I'd ask, blushing widely. You mean it, Johnny?" And he did mean it, because a little after my 19th birthday, he proposed with a beautiful diamond ring that once belonged to his grandmother. It was antique, with a silver band engraved with the phrase, "Everlasting Love," in such lovely cursive calligraphy, and to this day it has been the only ring that I have worn every single day of my life. I turned my photo album to the next page. On it, I saw another old picture of Johnny and I, soon after the engagement. He was holding me as we sat on the living room couch, and I was showing the ring to the camera, both of our smiles wide and bright. Of course I said yes. We both cried a few tears of joy, and along with my sisters and my mama, I got started right away on planning my perfect fairy tale wedding. But something changed with Johnny after that. He seemed to be pulling away from me. I saw him less and less, and the only excuse he offered was that he was busy with his own plans for the wedding. Part of me always knew that was a lie, but at the time, I just kept telling myself that he was being true to me, and prayed to God about it every night. However, about a week before the wedding was to take place, he came to me in the dark. He tossed a few small pebbles up to my second-story window as he did so many nights all those years before, but upon opening it, I did not see the smiling face I had grown accustomed to. Johnny was bruised and bloody. His clothes were in shreds, and he was drenched in sweat and covered in dirt. But it was what was behind him that concerned me the most. Deep in the foggy forest that once surrounded this old house of mine, I could see the glow of bright flames captured in handheld lanterns. The faint echoes of growls of hatred drifted over to my ears, warning me of what was happening. and my mind flashed back to my auntie's wise words on the day that Johnny and I had first met. Y'all are going to meet some real nasty people that say y'all shouldn't be friends now. They may try and scare you. Some of them may even try to hurt you. But the important thing is that you take care of each other, alright? They're after you, Johnny managed, his voice muffled from his swollen, busted lips. Both of his beautiful blue eyes had been blackened. Please, Bernadette, run away with me. They'll never let us be together here. I thought of my mother, my sisters, my friends. Slowly shaking my head, I took a deep breath. I can't just run away, Johnny. My whole life is here. Just come inside. He looked from me back to the approaching light of the lanterns. They ain't gonna let us keep those plans, he mumbled, just under his breath. Flashing that pitiful gaze back up to me, he furrowed his brows and clenched his jaw. I'm not gonna let them hurt you. I love you, Bernadette, forever. Before I had the chance to even realize what he was saying to me, he took off back through the grass of my yard. In a few seconds, he had vanished into the foggy trees beyond, leaving me scared and confused as I stood at my open window. I watched the lights of the lantern slow to a stop, and everything grew silent for a little while. Eventually, that radiance began to fade deeper into the forest as if the mob was retreating. I smiled at this, thinking that this meant that Johnny had somehow talked them out of doing whatever terrible things they were planning on doing. Unfortunately, I couldn't have been more wrong. Tearing up, I gazed down at that photo album in my lap. I found myself looking at the final picture that was ever taken of him alive. Although he was smiling and handsome within it, standing in front of my old house, arm in arm with me, all I could see was how he looked the last time I saw him. Within my mind's eye, he was lifelessly hanging from a tree, silhouetted by the early sunrise. His blue eyes were frozen as they stared down at me, led by his own father and older brother. That angry mob had lynched him in those dark and haunted woods. Like his blood did the earth, that cold, quiet moment had stained me, forever. Again, I found myself weeping, even still, at 99 years old, over my first love. My heart had never really healed from him because my mind never had the chance to grieve him, and that was before the very real and unfortunately not at all hallucinated fact that, after he died, I saw more of him than I did when he was alive. Yes, children, this is a ghost story, and it does get scary. It started a few weeks after the funeral. I was on my way to my first day back at work since I lost him. A full day of waiting tables and dealing with spoiled customers would do me some good, I thought, but I never even made it to the diner. At first I thought I was hallucinating. I've read a number of books that say things like bad can happen after a traumatic death, but I saw his face in the crowd on the busy street, and at first it was just a fleeting glimpse, an echo, a flash, a blur, like static on a television or white noise on the radio. But even so, it was clear enough to render me breathless, shocked, and frozen in place. Thankfully, I was on the sidewalk and not crossing the busy streets, because I surely would have been ran right over. I composed myself, and even though I was shaken up a bit, I continued on my way, and in telling myself that it was just in my head, I let the familiar sounds of the city comfort me. Its rhythm was infectious. It was faster and more upbeat than the one at home, which was more comforting and warm. If home was the blues, then the city was pop, and Johnny was soul. Making my way uptown, I let my eyes wander around at my surroundings. I took note of the street signs and the red, yellow, and green flashing lights, of the passers-by on the sidewalk around me, of the busy restaurants and bustling shops that encapsulated every street. The colors seemed to melt together as the horns and chatter of screeching tires all formed a song within my mind. Suddenly, I caught his gaze from an apartment window, silencing that song as if someone had turned a radio off. I did my best to ignore him, but I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and this time I was certain that it was Johnny. He was on the third floor of an apartment, across the street. His image was flickering about and glitching like a television with a bad signal, and I could have sworn I could hear static in my head as I studied him in shock and awe. With a shake of my head, I cleared my thoughts, and firmly told myself that I was hallucinating from the stress. Deciding to call my mother as soon as I got to the diner, I found myself waiting for a clearing in traffic. My work was just on the other side of the street, and it was lunchtime, our busiest hour of the day, so it was crowded and it clearly needed my help. But when I started to cross the street and looked up from my feet, I saw him on the other side, right across from me. He was standing there at the crosswalk, softly smiling. Oddly translucent, he seemed to be made of sizzling, spotty energy, radiating radio static from each and every one of his electrical vibrating molecules. Our gazes locked onto one another. We approached, and in the middle of the street we passed each other by, and time itself seemed to freeze. As I walked by him, he reached over to touch my hand, but his flesh was ethereal and faded right through my own. He didn't touch me. It was physically impossible. Yet he had somehow tainted me, changed me, altered me forever, and I felt it in every fiber of my being. Chills covered my entire body. I swooned, watching him slowly fade out of existence. Time began to move again. The city returned to life around me as I collapsed, and I fainted right there in the middle of the busy street. I awoke a few hours later in my own bed. The scent of my mother's spiced chicken noodle soup teased my nostrils from the bedside table. Mama greeted me with a calming smile from the corner of the room after watching over me for hours, and I instantly felt safe again. Mama told me that she had my leave of absence extended with my manager. He told her to tell me that he was praying for me. I thanked her, but refused to tell her what I had seen. The last thing I needed was to be locked away in some asylum. Unfortunately, over the next few weeks, things would just get worse. I started seeing flashes of Johnny in the mirror as I washed my face or brushed my teeth or styled my hair or did my makeup. At first he would be standing there, smiling sweetly, raising a single brow and chewing his lower lip, looking me up and down like he would when I was wearing a new dress or something, but in a split second, in a burst of loud static, he was dead, all bloody and beaten, dangling from a noose that hung from the ceiling. I'd even seen him in television shows on the TV. He would be an extra in a sitcom or a member of a studio audience, just smiling. As usual, he was see-through, flickering in and out of existence. He'd start out smiling or shooting me a flirty wink, but then he was in the shadows, swaying back and forth as he hung from the ceiling. On the radio, I could faintly hear his voice singing along to all of our favorite songs. Although his voice echoed eerily, it sounded almost comforting at first, only to devolve into the most horrifying, almost demonic growls over time. Of course, these were always accompanied by static and eerie audible anomalies, and it would render my radio unable to play for a good few hours afterward, only screeching the most ear-piercing static I have ever heard. Each time he appeared, he was handsome, but ghostly, but he always ended up changing to some hellish form. Around the waist was where his translucent form began to disappear into nothingness. He seemed paler than normal. Bluish veins pulsated in his gaunt face, and capillaries had been burst in his eyes, making the white a terrifying red, and his neck was shattered, making his head hang down onto his chest, although this did not stop him from chillingly staring into my eyes. I saw him in the woods around my house. I saw him at the grocery store. I even saw him at church on Sundays. It was like he was stalking me, but as soon as he transformed to scare me, he would always quietly vanish, which made me question my sanity that much more. It wasn't long after that I began to hear of the disappearances. One by one, men from the white part of town were reported missing. It started with Johnny's racist older brother, then his bigot of a father, then their hateful friends. Eventually, they were all found lynched deep in the dark, fog-stricken forests of Decemberville. Each and every one of them were ruled as suicides, but I knew the truth. Johnny was seeking his revenge, and this terrified me to no end. I began to pray to God to let him move on, to let him rest, but he was attached to me, like a blood stain on carpet, like a tattoo on flesh. His spirit had been fused together with my own, and I tried everything. I talked to my pastor, and he told me to pray. When that didn't work, I talked to a Catholic priest, and he told me to get an exorcism. After that almost killed me, I took a different route and found a voodoo priestess in New Orleans. She did some eerie ritual on me involving my own blood, but my love remained, and when I asked an atheist, I was nearly committed into an asylum for the insane. Yet, Johnny was relentless. His vengeance seemed to be complete, so why was he still haunting me? Was I to be his final victim? After all, what happened to him was my fault. If he hadn't have fallen in love with a black girl, if he wouldn't have refused to lead them to me, he would have never been killed. Eventually, I ended up trying to communicate with him, although I am not certain if he could comprehend my words through my terrified sobs. I was begging him to let me go, to move on, and to let me move on in turn. But he was never really fully there, fully present before me, almost as if he weren't completely himself anymore. He had been reduced to a fingerprint, a stain on reality, an echo of his former self, a warped, demonic, see-through reflection made of ectoplasm and light. In desperation, I began to read about lingering spirits in the afterlife, and I learned that he was being pulled into the world beyond, but that something was still keeping him here with me. But all of the books I read had led me to believe that his unfinished business was the vengeance he had sought. So then, why was he still haunting me? And it was then that I realized that it wasn't any of his own desires that was holding him. it was now me and my greedy heart that had bound him to this earth. It was I that was refusing to let him enter those pearly gates because my love for him had become a chain, his heart the shackle, and that, in my selfishness, I didn't really want to stop. The more I tried to speak with him, the more his horrifying visage melted away to reveal a translucent, grayscale version of my beloved Johnny. His eyes went from glowing crimson to his normal shimmering blue, and although he remained pale, almost glowingly bright, that noose faded away in time, and his neck was no longer broken. And whilst this occurred, I slowly grew more comfortable with seeing him out of the corners of my eyes. It was almost like a flower blooming in spring, the darkness of his rage slowly shedding away, revealing the pure white light of his love for me that had been hidden deep within. His beauty had returned, but he remained ghostly, brilliant, translucent, supernatural, magical, and his comforting energy came back along with it. Eventually, he was able to show himself to me fully, if only for a few moments in the moonlight. We still weren't able to touch, but we could finally communicate. His voice was always whispered and layered with echoes, but I never had trouble comprehending him. He didn't seem to understand that he was dead, and it was incredibly hard for me to explain it to him. The poor phantom was still talking about the wedding and having kids, but he couldn't remember that he had repeated himself so much, as if he couldn't make memories beyond the point that his heart had stopped beating, and it broke my heart all over again each time we had the same conversations. Around the same time, I had gotten bit by the songwriting bug. Johnny had inspired me, it seemed, and in doing so, ignited a passion within my very soul that has yet to be quenched. At first it began as a little hobby, something for Johnny and I to pass the time with, but as you all know, over time, it grew to be something more. I started singing, and Lord, I was good. It wasn't long before I was performing at nightclubs and bars and the like, and people loved me just like they did back then when I would sing in the church choirs as a little girl. Of course, with being all out and about, I ended up meeting new people, and Johnny did not appreciate that at all. He would do whatever he could to sabotage me, even going as far as possessing me in order to control my every movement. In doing so, he would begin to control me, puppeteer me. He became an ethereal ventriloquist, forcing me to say the most offensive things in front of my new love interests. And of course, this ended up chasing a number of suitors away. Eventually, I had enough. I blew up on my poor Johnny, breaking his heart with my words. It was that very night that he vanished, and almost immediately, I regretted my decision. After that, however, I was finally able to hold down a man, got married, had kids, yet when he forbade me from singing for anyone other than him, I realized that I had made a mistake, and the night just grew darker. Eventually, the evidence of his ire toward me became apparent. I tried to hide it. Whether it was with makeup or sunglasses, I did my best to mask the truth, but apparently none of it was ever enough. Unbeknownst to me, Johnny had been there the entire time, watching, waiting. He was always with me, hiding in my shadow, hauntingly singing those old Motown tunes, and he would always figure it out before the sun rose on my black eyes and busted lips. Putting the pieces together every night, he realized that I had married someone else, had children with him, and that I was being abused. And in the twilight, I would always find myself desperately trying to talk him out of hurting my husband. But on one particularly hard night, the same night that my husband had struck on my babies for the first time, I didn't talk Johnny into showing mercy. I told him to do what he felt he needed to. I encouraged him to follow his heart, and I asked him to protect me and my children. The next morning, I found my husband hanging from a noose in the stairway. From the first floor, with him silhouetted by the sun, to me, he looked like Johnny all those years ago, and thankfully, this death, too, was ruled a suicide. Of course, my children and I all mourned, but in my heart, I knew that we were safer without him, and I had Johnny to thank for that. Nevertheless, it took me a long, long time to sing again. My heart was just too heavy for it, it seemed. There was no song in me during that time. The light in me had died, but Johnny wasn't going to let me wallow in my own misery forever. And when my voice finally broke free, I just couldn't stop. Lyrics danced around my mind, songs kept pouring out of me, and every place in town wanted me to perform. I saved for a whole year to get myself that old acoustic guitar, and when I finally learned how to play that sucker, I was unstoppable. Everything happened so fast. Before I knew it, I was being invited to sing at venues that were miles and miles away from my small little southern town. Then I was on a nationwide tour, and finally I was signed to Motown Records, where I found myself recording my debut album, Undying Love. And everyone knows this story. Undying Love was one on the charts for years, and my singles, Ghost, Spiritual Connection, and Haunted, were all huge hits. And I was very proud of them. My family had always been my priority, so aside from a few singles and EPs here and there, my singing career had all but began and ended with my one album, Undying Love. Stepping out of the spotlight was actually just as easy as it was to step into it. The music industry was more about money and sales than it was artistry and creativity. Part of me knew that before I had begun, but it did little to prepare me for the soulless executives, producers, and managers that preyed upon the artists they signed. If only those little children knew their grumpy neighborhood witch was actually the princess of soul music. I bet you if they did, they wouldn't dare each other to knock on my door anymore. Or perhaps they would still, but just for different reasons. The only true romance in my life was between Johnny and I, and we continued to catch up each and every night over a delicious home-cooked, candlelit dinner that I pretended to share with him. I would wear whichever dress I looked hottest in with my makeup and hair all done up how he liked it, and we would make love beneath the stars. And in beautiful, surreal, dreamlike moments, I would show him all the current soul music I liked, and let him see the advancements in modern technology. And he would never remember any of it, because in the first light of day he was born anew, dissipating into vapor in the sunrise, and when he coalesced back into existence in the moonlight, his memories would revert back to those on the night he was killed. With each passing night, he saw me age more and more. Sometimes he would just touch my cheek with his hand and gaze into my eyes, as if he hadn't even recognized me at first. Watching myself age in the eyes of my eternally youthful soulmate was one of the hardest things I had ever been through. But he returned to me every night and never hesitated to be intimate with me. And I'm sure you're all wondering, how exactly does that work? How would a ghost make love to a living being? Well, honestly, that's just none of your business. A lady has to keep some secrets, you know. I looked at the next page of the photo album. It is filled with mirror pictures I took of his phantom and I, spanning through literal decades. We'd make silly faces a lot, and you can really see me age as these pictures progress. Of course, in his spiritual form, he always looked odd and distorted as if there was a glitch in the camera or an imperfection in the film. But you all will know who that blob of light and color is now. Flipping through this gallery of memories once more, I realize something, and I smile. All in all, I have lived a beautiful life. There was some darkness, there has been some light, but Johnny was with me every step of the way. Tonight was the first time I told him about the cancer. As you know, it is in stage 4 and the doc says I don't have long left. I've been praying that I will only have to explain this to him once. I know it would confuse and frighten him enough the first time. But in my slowly beating heart, I can feel that tonight will be my last night on this beautiful planet of ours. My very own ache from all the adventures I've had. My once lovely face has been heavily wrinkled with the evidence of wide smiles and boisterous laughter. As I am writing the closing to this letter, Johnny is laying in the bed next to me. Our favorite record is playing and I have candles lit all around the room. He is running his fingers through my whitened hair and gazing into my eyes. He is smiling, telling me that he loves me and that he has been waiting for me for far too long. Soon, he says, death will embrace me in her cold arms, and he will walk with us up the stairway to heaven, holding my hand, and I just told him that he is and always has been my soulmate. Once upon a time, I was angry with God. I blamed him, accusing him of letting me fall in love and then ripping that love away from me, like taking a teddy bear from a little girl. But I have grown to appreciate the darkness along with that light because it all made me who I am today, and without that, none of you would be here. And my biggest accomplishments in life have always been my children, grandchildren, and great-grandbabies. It was a long time coming, but I am finally ready to see Jesus. I miss my mama, and my daddy, and my sisters too, but most of all, I just want to be with Johnny again. Hope you will find a love as everlasting as this. Every day of my life, he has made me happy. He has made me laugh. He has loved me. He has saved me. Even though I have had to explain decades worth of events to him every single night, the promise of simply speaking with him was what got me up some mornings. The two of us are like one soul, split into two bodies. Like the devil played a trick on God when he painted us to life and tore us apart. Neither of us really felt whole until the day we met, and I can't wait to be rejoined with him. I can't wait for him to make new memories with me up in that kingdom in the clouds, and I can't wait to rest in peace with him. I am leaving the photo album on my bedside table. Atop it will be the will, and on top of that will be this letter, and the cross necklace and ring Johnny had given me when we were young. Hope you all find some inspiration for this story. I know my grandbabies are artists and writers and musicians, so it would be nice if at least one of you could make something gorgeous with this. But what I truly want is for y'all to find love like Johnny and I did. To my adult children, I am truly sorry about your father, but if I didn't ask for Johnny's assistance, he would have just continued to hurt us. You all deserved a daddy, but none of you deserved a bully. My adult grandchildren, I can't believe you've already started families of your own. Time really does fly by when you're having fun, and I promise your lives are forever filled with magic just like mine has been. May you too know the joys of having your grandchildren tease you for not knowing the latest fashion and music while your ghostly lover makes faces at them they cannot see. And to my great-grandbabies, my kids already know that I have never minded what race they dated. Hell, gender was never even an issue for me. Just ask your aunties Lily and Rose. All I care about is that your partners make you happy, that they fight for you, that they protect you, support you, that they love you, truly, endlessly. So, everyone, next time you're listening to some of my old records, remember Johnny. Feel his spirit in that music. Look at the photo album and see the indescribable light and color that radiated from his spirit, and know in your hearts that your grandmama Bernie found a love that hatred just could not kill. All my love, forever, Bernadette Spector. P.S. Don't be playing with no spirit boards trying to call me and bug me now. I'll be busy. Won't have time for all y'all's foolishness.
Red.